The blood-red sun hung low over the horizon, casting long shadows across the dusty main street of Redwood Creek as Vanessa Norton stumbled from the stagecoach, clutching her meager belongings in a worn carpet bag. Her once fine dress was travel-stained, her dark hair falling in tangled waves from what had been an elegant arrangement. The bruise on her cheek had faded to a yellowish purple, but the wounds inside still felt fresh as the day her husband had given her that final beating before she'd fled Denver with nothing but the clothes on her back and whatever she could grab in 5 frantic minutes. The year was 1878, and Vanessa had come west with dreams that had turned to dust faster than a summer rain in the desert. Now, at 26, she was starting over in this remote corner of Colorado territory where no one knew her name or her shame. "Last stop, madam," the driver called down. "Redwood Creek, end of the line." Vanessa nodded her thanks, though gratitude was the furthest thing from what she felt. She'd chosen this place precisely because it was the end of the line, somewhere her husband would never think to look for her, somewhere she could disappear. The town's lone hotel loomed before her, a 2-story clapboard structure with peeling paint and a crooked sign. It wasn't much, but it would have to do until she found work and a more permanent arrangement. As she trudged toward the hotel, her worn boots kicking up dust, she failed to notice the hitching post directly in her path. Her foot caught on the weathered wood, sending her sprawling forward. Her carpetbag flew from her hands, spilling its meager contents across the street: a few garments, a hairbrush, and a small framed photograph that skittered across the hard, packed dirt. "Careful there, madam." Strong hands caught her before she hit the ground, steadying her with surprising gentleness. Vanessa flinched at the contact, jerking away as soon as she had her footing. "I don't need help," she said sharply, avoiding the stranger's eyes as she knelt to gather her scattered belongings. "Didn't say you did," the man replied easily, crouching to retrieve her photograph before the wind could carry it away. "But sometimes help comes along whether we're looking for it or not." Despite herself, Vanessa glanced up. The man before her wore the practical garb of a rancher: dusty denims, a work-worn shirt with sleeves rolled to reveal tanned forearms, and a wide-brimmed hat that shadowed his features. But it was his eyes that caught her attention, deep blue and steady, with none of the cruel calculation she'd grown accustomed to seeing in a man's gaze. He extended the photograph, careful not to touch her fingers as she took it. "Thomas Gray," he said by way of introduction. "Most folks call me Tucker." "Vanessa," she replied, omitting her surname. "Thank you for the assistance." His smile was slight but genuine. "New in town," she nodded, clutching her now closed carpetbag tightly. "Just arrived." "Well then, welcome to Redwood Creek." "Not much to look at, but the folks are decent enough." He gestured toward the hotel. "Martha Higgins runs that establishment. Tell her Tucker sent you, and she might even throw in a hot meal with your room." Vanessa's pride warred with her empty stomach. She hadn't eaten since yesterday. "I don't need charity," she said, the words coming out harsher than intended. Tucker Gray's expression didn't change, but something flickered in those blue eyes. "Not offering charity, madam, just common courtesy." Before she could respond, he tipped his hat and turned, walking toward the general store without another word. Vanessa watched him go, uncertain why his simple kindness had left her so unsettled. Martha Higgins proved to be a stout woman with iron-gray hair and a no-nonsense manner that Vanessa found strangely comforting. When she mentioned Tucker Gray's name, the older woman's stern expression softened marginally. "Friend of Tucker's, are you?" "Well then, room at the back, away from the street noise. Dinner's at 6 sharp." She slid a key across the counter. $2 a week in advance." Vanessa hesitated, counting out her dwindling funds. "I'll need to find work." "Is there anything in town suitable for Doc Miller's looking for help at his office?" Martha interrupted, eyeing Vanessa with newfound interest. "Can you read and write?" "Yes, of course. I was a school teacher before." Vanessa stopped herself. "Before I came west." Martha nodded. "Doc's getting on in years. Needs someone to keep his records straight and help with patients. Nothing improper," she added, seeing Vanessa's expression. "Just bandages and such. Pays fair." It wasn't teaching, but it was respectable work. "Thank you, I'll inquire tomorrow." That night, after a simple but hearty meal of beef stew and cornbread, Vanessa sat on the narrow bed in her room, staring at the worn photograph she'd nearly lost. It showed her parents, both gone now, standing proudly outside their modest home in Pennsylvania. How disappointed they would be to see their daughter now a runaway wife, hiding from a man who'd vowed to love and cherish her. Charles Norton had seemed so charming when he'd courted her, the successful businessman who'd swept the small-town schoolteacher off her feet. The changes had been gradual, first controlling, then possessive, then violent. By the time she realized the danger, she was already trapped in a marriage that had become a prison. She'd endured 3 years before that final night, when his rage had been so terrifying that she'd believed he might kill her. While he'd slept off his whiskey, she'd taken what little she could and fled on the midnight train. Sleep came fitfully that night, filled with dreams of pursuit and capture. She woke before dawn, her nightdress damp with sweat despite the cool mountain air. Dr. Miller's office was a small building near the edge of town, its whitewashed exterior gleaming in the morning sunlight. The doctor himself was older than she'd expected, with a shock of white hair and liver-spotted hands that still moved with precision as he sorted through glass bottles of medicine. "Mrs. Higgins sent you, did she?" he asked, peering at Vanessa over wire-rimmed spectacles. "Ever worked in medicine before?" "No, sir," she answered honestly. "But I learn quickly and I'm not squeamish." He harumphed, seemingly satisfied. "Can you start today? Had a mining accident yesterday and 3 men need their bandages changed, plus my records are a disaster." He gestured toward a stack of papers on a cluttered desk. "Yes, sir, I'd be grateful for the opportunity." The work was demanding but absorbing. Vanessa spent the morning organizing the doctor's chaotic filing system while he saw patients. In the afternoon, he taught her how to clean and dress wounds, his instruction firm but patient. By evening, her back ached from bending over papers, and her fingers were stained with iodine, but she felt a satisfaction she hadn't experienced in years. "You'll do, doctor," Miller declared as they locked up for the night. $7 a week, paid every Saturday. Hours are from 7 to 6, with Sundays off unless there's an emergency. It was less than she'd earned as a teacher, but it would cover her room and board with enough left for modest savings. "Thank you, doctor. I appreciate the opportunity." "Got Tucker Gray to thank for that," the old man said casually as he pocketed his keys. "Came by this morning, said I ought to give you a chance." Vanessa froze. "Mr. Gray spoke to you about me, just said a capable woman was looking for work." "Tucker's got good judgment about people," he squinted at her. "Problem? No," she said quickly. I don't like being beholden to strangers." Dr. Miller shrugged. "Way I see it, we all need a hand sometimes. Pride's a luxury most can't afford out here." As Vanessa walked back to the hotel, the setting sun painted the mountains in shades of gold and purple. The beauty caught her by surprise, forcing her to pause and simply breathe. For 3 years, she'd lived in fear, head down, trying to be invisible. Now, for the first time, she allowed herself to look up, to see the vastness of the world beyond her pain. The moment was interrupted by the sound of approaching hoofbeats. Instinctively, she moved to the side of the road, keeping her gaze lowered as a rider approached. But instead of passing, the horse slowed, and a familiar voice called out. "Evening, Miss Vanessa. Heard you got the job with Doc Miller." She looked up to see Tucker Gray atop a handsome chestnut gelding. He sat easy in the saddle, one hand resting loosely on his thigh, the picture of relaxed confidence. "You spoke to Dr. Miller about me," she said, unable to keep the accusation from her voice. His expression remained maddeningly calm. "Just told him someone new was in town looking for work. The decision to hire you was his alone. I didn't ask for your interference." "No, you didn't." He adjusted his hat slightly. "But sometimes the world gives us what we need, not what we ask for." Before she could formulate a suitably cutting response, he continued, "You eat dinner yet?" "Martha's serving chicken and dumplings tonight, best in the territory." The casual invitation caught her off guard. "I know I haven't eaten. Mind if I join you? Been out checking fence lines all day and I'm about ready to eat my boot." Despite herself, Vanessa felt a smile tug at her lips. "That doesn't sound particularly appetizing." Tucker's eyes crinkled at the corners. "Exactly why I'm hoping for chicken instead." She should refuse. Getting close to anyone, especially a man, was dangerous. Charles might still be looking for her, and yet. The simple normalcy of the invitation was tempting. "Very well," she heard herself say, "but I pay for my own meal." Tucker dismounted with fluid grace, leading his horse alongside her as they walked. Wouldn't have it any other way. Dinner was surprisingly pleasant. Tucker spoke easily of inconsequential things, the weather, local gossip, tales of his ranch just outside of town. He asked her no personal questions, seeming content to fill the silence with his own stories. Vanessa found herself relaxing incrementally, even contributing occasional comments or questions. "So you run the ranch alone?" she asked as they finished their meal. "Got a few hired hands, but mostly it's just me and about 200 head of cattle. My pa started it, left it to me when he passed 5 years back." There was a flicker of old grief in his expression, quickly masked. "It's good land, keeps me busy." "You're not married?" The question slipped out before she could stop it. Tucker's smile was wry, "Never found the time." "Or maybe the right woman." He studied her for a moment. "How about you? There a Mr. Vanessa waiting somewhere?" She tensed, her hand instinctively rising to touch the faded bruise on her cheek. "No," she said flatly, "there's no one." Tucker's gaze lingered on her face, taking in the bruise and the sudden hardness in her eyes. He nodded slowly. "Well, that's probably enough conversation for one evening. I should see you safely back to your room." "I can manage," she said stiffly, rising from the table. "Never doubted it," he replied easily, standing as well. "But my ma raised me to be a gentleman, and she'd haunt me something fierce if I let a lady walk unescorted after dark." Despite her wariness, Vanessa found herself appreciating his company as they walked the short distance to her room. Tucker maintained a respectful distance, his stride matching hers, his presence somehow both protective and undemanding. At her door, he removed his hat, holding it loosely in his hands. "Thank you for the company, Miss Vanessa," made a plain meal considerably more enjoyable. "Thank you for the conversation," she replied, surprised to find she meant it. He hesitated, then said, "Doc Miller has Sundays off. If you've a mind for it, I could show you some of the countryside. There's a spot up in the foothills where the wildflowers are thick as carpet this time of year." Alarm bells rang in Vanessa's mind. Isolated locations, alone with a man she barely knew. It was precisely the sort of situation she'd vowed to avoid. "I don't think that would be appropriate," she said stiffly. Tucker nodded, seemingly unsurprised. "Fair enough. Offer stands if you change your mind." He settled his hat back on his head. "Sleep well, Miss Vanessa." She watched him walk away, his tall figure disappearing down the dimly lit hallway, and felt an unexpected pang of regret. The next few weeks fell into a rhythm. Vanessa worked diligently at the doctor's office, gradually earning the old physician's gruff approval. She took her meals at the hotel, occasionally joined by Tucker when his ranch work brought him into town. Despite her initial reservations, she found herself looking forward to those shared dinners and his easy conversation. Other townspeople began to acknowledge her as well, the storekeeper who put aside the newspaper for her, knowing she enjoyed reading. The blacksmith's wife who invited her to join the ladies' sewing circle. The young mother who brought her feverish child to the doctor and later pressed a jar of home-preserved peaches into Vanessa's hands as thanks. Small kindnesses, freely given, that she accepted with increasing grace. One evening in late June, nearly a month after her arrival, Vanessa returned to her room to find a small package wrapped in brown paper waiting outside her door. Inside was a book of poetry, Wordsworth, whose nature verses she'd mentioned admiring during a conversation with Tucker. There was no note, but she knew who had left it. The following morning, she found Tucker at the general store examining a new shipment of tools. "You shouldn't have," she said without preamble, holding the book. He glanced up, a smile warming his features. "Good morning to you too, Miss Vanessa." "The book," she clarified. "It's too much." "Just a book," he replied with a shrug. "Thought you might enjoy it. I can't accept gifts." "Why not?" The question was simple. His tone genuinely curious. Vanessa faltered. How could she explain that every gift from her husband had come with strings attached, with expectations she couldn't meet, with consequences for perceived ingratitude? "I don't deserve kindness," she whispered, the words escaping before she could stop them. Tucker's expression changed then, something fierce and tender replacing his usual easy manner. He moved closer, not touching her, but near enough that she could see the gold flecks in his blue eyes. "Then let me teach you what it feels like," he said softly, the moment stretched between them charged with possibilities. Then Tucker stepped back, giving her space. That wildflower spot I mentioned, still there, still pretty, Sunday's coming up, think about it. He touched the brim of his hat in farewell and walked away, leaving Vanessa clutching the book of poetry, her heart racing as if she'd run a mile. Sunday dawned clear and bright, the summer heat tempered by the mountain breeze. Vanessa stood in her room, staring at her reflection in the small mirror above the washbasin. She'd spent an hour mending and pressing her best dress, a simple blue cotton that brought out the color in her eyes. She was being foolish. Reckless, even. And yet, she couldn't deny the flutter of anticipation in her stomach as she pinned up her hair. Tucker was waiting by the hotel's front porch, hat in hand, looking freshly shaved and slightly nervous. His face brightened visibly when she appeared. "You came," he said, sounding genuinely surprised. "I came," she confirmed, feeling suddenly shy. He helped her onto a borrowed wagon, the gesture respectful rather than presumptuous. They drove out of town, the mountains rising before them, conversation flowing more easily than she'd expected. The wildflower meadow was everything he'd promised: a sloping field of blue lupines, orange paintbrush, and yellow sunflowers stretching toward distant pines. Tucker spread a blanket beneath the shade of an aspen grove and produced a picnic lunch from a hamper. "Martha's contribution," he explained, setting out fried chicken, biscuits, and a jar of preserves. "When I told her where we were headed, she insisted we couldn't come without provisions." Vanessa laughed, the sound startling her with its unfamiliarity. "She's determined to fatten me up. Says I'm too thin for Colorado winters." "Wise woman, Martha," Tucker agreed, his gaze warm as it rested on Vanessa's face. "You're looking well, though. Redwood Creek agrees with you." The simple observation made her pause. He was right, she had changed since arriving. The constant tension in her shoulders had eased. She slept through most nights now. Even her reflection seemed different color in her cheeks, light in her eyes that had been absent for years. "Yes," she said thoughtfully, "I suppose it does." After they'd eaten, Tucker suggested a walk along a nearby stream. The path was easy, winding through wildflowers and stands of aspen. They talked of books they'd read, places they'd seen. Tucker spoke of his dream to expand his ranch to breed horses as well as cattle. Vanessa admitted her love of teaching, how she missed the bright faces of children discovering new ideas. "Why'd you stop?" Tucker asked. "Teaching, I mean." The question was innocent, but it brought reality crashing back. Vanessa's steps faltered. "I married," she said shortly. "My husband didn't approve of his wife working." Tucker was silent for a moment, processing this. "The bruise you had when you arrived," he said finally. "That was his doing," she nodded, not trusting her voice. "Is he looking for you? I don't know." Vanessa stared at the flowing stream. "Probably. He doesn't like losing what he considers his property." Tucker's jaw tightened, but his voice remained gentle. "You're not property, Vanessa, you never were." "I know that now." She hugged her arms around herself. "I was so young when we married, 21, naive. He was charming, successful. By the time I realized who he truly was, I was trapped." "But you got out," Tucker reminded her. "That took courage." She hadn't thought of it that way, had seen her flight as desperation, not bravery. "I suppose I did." They walked in silence for a while, the only sounds the gurgling stream and birdsong from the trees above. Finally, Tucker spoke again. "Thank you for trusting me with your story." Such a simple thing to say, yet it moved her deeply. "Thank you for listening," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. The trip back to town was quieter, both lost in thought. As they approached Redwood Creek, Vanessa felt a sense of safety she hadn't expected, as if the small town with its dusty streets and weathered buildings had become a haven. Tucker pulled the wagon to a stop outside the hotel. "Would you have dinner with me tomorrow?" he asked. "Not here, though. At my ranch, I make a decent stew, contrary to what the folks in town might tell you." Vanessa hesitated. Going to his home away from town was a risk. And yet she realized with sudden clarity she trusted this man more than she'd trusted anyone in years. "Yes," she said, "I'd like that." His answering smile was like sunrise breaking over the mountains. The following evening, Tucker arrived in town to collect her, this time on horseback with a spare mount, a gentle mare with a patient disposition. Vanessa had never ridden astride before, always side saddle, but Tucker showed her how to position herself, how to hold the reins loosely but firmly. She knows the way better than I do, he assured Vanessa as they set off. Just let her follow my horse and you'll be fine. The Tucker Gray Ranch lay in a protected valley about 3 miles from town, a sturdy cabin with a wide porch, a large barn, several outbuildings and corrals containing horses and cattle. It wasn't grand, but it was well maintained, the mark of a man who took pride in his work. It's lovely, Vanessa said sincerely as they dismounted. It's home, Tucker replied, a note of pride in his voice. Come inside, I promised you stew and I aim to deliver. The cabin's interior was simple but comfortable, a main room with a stone fireplace, wooden furniture worn smooth with use, shelves lined with books, and surprisingly homey touches like braided rugs and curtains at the windows. My mother's influence, Tucker explained, seeing her looking at the curtains. She believed a house should be a home, not just a place to sleep. She was right. Vanessa ran her fingers along the spines of his books. You've read all these, Winter Nights Get Long, he said with a smile. Not much else to do when the snows piled head-high. True to his word, Tucker prepared a hearty beef stew, serving it with fresh bread he'd brought from town. They ate at his sturdy table, the conversation flowing easily between them, punctuated by comfortable silences. As the meal concluded, Vanessa felt a contentment she'd almost forgotten was possible. Thank you for this evening, she said as they sat on his porch afterward, watching the sunset paint the mountains. For everything, really. Your kindness has meant more than I can express. Tucker turned to look at her, his expression serious. Vanessa, you deserve every kindness this world has to offer. I wish you could see yourself through my eyes, how strong you are, how brave. She shook her head, uncomfortable with the praise. I'm just surviving. No, he said firmly. You're living, there's a difference. He hesitated, then continued, his voice lower. When you first came to town, you flinched every time someone came near you. You wouldn't meet anyone's eyes. Now you walk tall, you laugh, you've bloomed like those wildflowers we saw yesterday. Tears pricked at Vanessa's eyes. That's because of you? No, Tucker said again, reaching out slowly to take her hand. I just created the space. The strength was always yours. She looked down at their joined hands, his tanned and calloused from work, hers paler but no longer as delicate as they'd once been. Working with Dr. Miller had changed her physically as well as mentally, building both muscle and confidence. Tucker, she said softly, I'm still afraid. Of Charles finding me, of trusting again, of feeling too much. I know, he replied, and that's okay. Fear doesn't make you weak. It's what you do despite the fear that matters. He raised her hand to his lips, pressing a gentle kiss to her knuckles. I care for you, Vanessa. More than I expected to. More than might be wise, considering. But I need you to know that I'll never rush you, never pressure you. Whatever happens between us, if anything happens, it'll be your choice. Always. The simple promise, so different from the demands and expectations of her past, broke something open inside her. Vanessa leaned forward and kissed him tentatively at first, then with growing certainty as his arms came around her, strong and protective yet somehow freeing. When they parted, both breathless, Tucker rested his forehead against hers. Well, he murmured, I definitely wasn't expecting that. Vanessa laughed, the sound bubbling up from a place of genuine joy. Neither was I. The summer days lengthened, then began to shorten as July turned to August. Vanessa's relationship with Tucker deepened gradually, at a pace that respected her lingering fears while acknowledging their growing feelings. They shared dinners, walks, quiet evenings on his porch or in her small hotel room. Occasionally, when the doctor didn't need her, she would ride out to the ranch and help Tucker with small tasks, gathering eggs from his chickens, tending the vegetable garden his mother had started years ago. Dr. Miller, observing her blossoming happiness with characteristic gruffness, increased her salary without comment. Martha Higgins began to drop hints about vacant cottages for rent in town, more suitable for a lady establishing herself permanent-like. The women of the sewing circle included her in their conversations, no longer treating her as an outsider. Redwood Creek was becoming home in a way Denver never had, but shadows from the past remained, Vanessa still startled at unexpected noises. She avoided the saloon end of town, where drunken male voices triggered memories she fought to suppress. And each time the stagecoach arrived from the east, she watched anxiously from the doctor's window, scanning for a familiar face she dreaded seeing. One afternoon in early September, as Vanessa organized medicine bottles in the doctor's cabinet, she heard the town marshal's voice in the outer office. Got a telegram from Denver Doc. Fellow asking after a woman matching Mrs. Norton's description. Says she's his wife, ran off with family valuables. Vanessa froze, the bottle in her hand nearly slipping from suddenly numb fingers. That's so. Dr. Miller's voice was neutral. And what did you tell this concerned husband? Haven't replied yet. Thought I'd check with you first, seeing as how you've employed the lady in question. There was a long pause before Dr. Miller spoke again. Marshall, in 40 years of practice, I've seen plenty of accidents that weren't accidents. Broken arms from falls, bruised faces from walking into doors. When Miss Vanessa arrived here, she had that look in her eyes like a beaten dog expecting another kick. I noticed, the marshal admitted. But if she's a married woman, then her husband should be ashamed for driving her to flee, Dr. Miller interrupted sharply. I don't know anything about family valuables, but I know an abused woman when I see one. What would you have me do, Doc? The law's the law. Another pause. Tell him you've seen no such woman. Telegraph lines go down all the time out here. Messages get lost. And if he comes looking himself, then we'll deal with that when it happens. Meanwhile, I suggest you mention this conversation to Tucker Gray. He'd want to know. Vanessa sank into a chair, legs too weak to support her. Charles had found her, or would soon. Her sanctuary was crumbling by the time Dr. Miller entered the back room. She had composed herself enough to stand, though her hands still trembled. You heard, he said. It wasn't a question, she nodded. I should leave tonight. I won't bring trouble to people who have been kind to me. Nonsense, the old doctor snapped. Running didn't solve your problem before, it won't now. Besides, you've got something here you didn't have in Denver. What's that? People who care about you, people who'll stand with you. He reached out awkwardly to pat her shoulder. Go talk to Tucker, he'll know what to do. Tucker was already riding into town when she left the doctor's office, his expression grim. The marshal had found him first. You heard, she said, echoing Dr. Miller's words. I heard. Tucker dismounted, tying his horse to the hitching post. Let's talk somewhere private. They walked to the small church at the edge of town, empty on a weekday afternoon. Sitting in a back pew, Tucker took her hands in his. I won't let him take you, he said without preamble. Not if you don't want to go. The law, to hell with the law, Tucker interrupted, his voice fierce. A man who beats his wife forfeits any right to her. Vanessa shook her head. You don't understand. Charles is powerful. He has connections, money. If he comes here, he won't come alone. Neither will you be alone. Tucker squeezed her hands. Vanessa, do you want to be free of him, truly free? More than anything. Then marry me. The proposal, so sudden and unexpected, left her speechless. Tucker hurried on. I know it's not the romantic moment I'd planned, and I know we've only known each other a few months, but I love you, Vanessa. I think you might love me too. If we're married, it complicates things for him. Legally, morally. Tucker, I can't ask you to. You're not asking, I'm offering. His blue eyes were earnest, determined. Even if he wasn't a threat, I'd still want to marry you, maybe not today, but someday. He's just sped up my timeline. Vanessa's mind raced. Marriage had been a prison before, but Tucker wasn't Charles. Every moment with him had reinforced that truth. Where Charles had demanded, Tucker offered. Where Charles had taken, Tucker gave. Yes, she whispered. Yes, I'll marry you. The ceremony took place that evening in the same church, with Dr. Miller, Martha Higgins, and the marshal as witnesses. The preacher, sensing urgency but not asking questions, performed the service with dignity and dispatch. Tucker had somehow produced a simple gold band that had belonged to his mother. I've been carrying it for weeks, he admitted as he slipped it onto her finger, waiting for the right moment. They spent their wedding night at Tucker's ranch. The consummation of their marriage, both tender and passionate, a healing experience that left Vanessa in tears. Not from pain or fear, but from the overwhelming realization that physical love could be gentle, mutual, affirming. I love you, she told him afterward, cradled in his arms. I didn't say it before, but I do. Tucker kissed her forehead. I know, I've seen it in your eyes for weeks now. 2 days later, a private carriage arrived in Redwood Creek. Escorted by 2 men who might have been hired guns or law officers, the distinction seemed deliberately blurred. From its luxurious interior emerged Charles Norton, as elegantly dressed and coldly handsome as Vanessa remembered. Word spread quickly. By the time Charles entered the marshal's office, Tucker and Vanessa were already there, along with Dr. Miller and the town's only lawyer, a sharp-eyed man named Jenkins. Charles stopped short at the sight of Vanessa, his practiced smile faltering. "Vanessa, my dear. I've been so worried." "Hello, Charles," she replied, her voice steadier than she'd expected. Tucker's hand rested supportively on her back. Charles's gaze flicked to Tucker, then back to Vanessa. "I've come to take you home, of course. This foolishness has gone on long enough. Mrs. Gray isn't going anywhere she doesn't wish to go," Jenkins interjected smoothly. Charles blinked. "I beg your pardon, my wife," Tucker said clearly, "is staying right here in Redwood Creek with me." Charles's face contorted. "That's absurd. She's already married to me." Jenkins produced papers from his briefcase. "According to my research, you and the former Miss Norton were married in Denver in 1875. However, Colorado territory law recognizes abandonment as grounds for dissolution of marriage. You abandoned your wife when you drove her from her home through cruelty and violence." "That's preposterous," Charles sputtered. "She stole from me, ran away. I took nothing that wasn't mine," Vanessa interrupted, finding her voice. "The jewelry was my mother's. The money came from selling my books, the ones you said I no longer needed once I had you to think for me." Charles took a step toward her, his mask of civility slipping. "You ungrateful." Tucker moved smoothly between them. "That's close enough, Norton." The marshal, who had been watching silently, finally spoke. "Mr. Norton, I've taken statements from Dr. Miller regarding the physical condition of Mrs. Gray when she arrived in town. I've also wired the Denver police about certain rumors concerning your treatment of your former wife." Their response was illuminating. Charles looked from face to face, finding no allies. His expression hardened. "This isn't over. I have resources, connections, so do we," Dr. Miller interrupted. "Small towns stick together, Mr. Norton. Any trouble you bring here will be met with a unified response. And," Tucker added quietly, "if you ever come near my wife again, our conversation won't be nearly this civilized." There was no mistaking the steel beneath his words. Charles hesitated, then straightened his jacket with an attempt at dignity. "Keep her," he said coldly. "She was never worth the trouble anyway." He stormed out, the door slamming behind him. Through the window, they watched him climb into his carriage and depart, his hired men following on horseback. "Think he'll be back?" the marshal asked. Tucker shook his head. "Men like that are cowards at heart. He'll find an easier target." Later, alone at the ranch, Vanessa finally allowed herself to cry tears of relief, of lingering fear, but mostly of overwhelming gratitude. "Hey now," Tucker murmured, holding her close. "It's over, you're safe." "I know," she said through her tears. "I just never thought I'd be free of him. Never thought I deserved to be." Tucker tilted her chin up, his gaze intense. "You deserve everything good in this world, Vanessa Gray, and I plan to spend the rest of my life making sure you believe that." 1 year later, Vanessa stood on the porch of the ranch house, now their home, watching as Tucker rode in from checking the herd. Her hand rested on her swollen belly, feeling the strong kicks of their unborn child. In the month since Charles's departure, Vanessa had gradually shed the last vestiges of fear. She'd taken over teaching duties at the town school 3 days a week, while still helping Dr. Miller with his practice. The nightmares had faded, replaced by dreams of the future, their future. Tucker dismounted, his face lighting up at the sight of her. "How are my 2 favorite people today?" he asked, placing his hand beside hers on her belly. "Restless," she replied with a smile. "Your son takes after his father, can't sit still for a minute," or daughter, Tucker amended. "Either way, they're going to be as stubborn as their mother." Vanessa laughed, leaning into his embrace. "I love you, Tucker Gray." "I love you too," he replied, kissing her softly, "more every day." As the sun set behind the mountains, casting long shadows across their land, Vanessa reflected on the journey that had brought her here, from fear to love, from despair to hope, from believing she deserved nothing to accepting everything. It hadn't been easy, and there had been dark days even after Charles left, when old patterns of thought threatened to return. But Tucker had been patient, steadfast in his promise to teach her what kindness felt like. And slowly, day by day, she had learned to accept it, to believe in it, and finally to return it in full measure. That night, as they lay together in their bed, Tucker's hand protectively covering her belly, Vanessa whispered, "Thank you for teaching me." Tucker's eyes, drowsy with sleep, focused on her face. Teaching you what kindness feels like, what love feels like, what home feels like. His smile was tender in the moonlight. Those weren't lessons, Vanessa, they were reminders you knew all along. You just needed someone to help you remember. As she drifted toward sleep in the circle of his arms, Vanessa knew he was right. The capacity for love had always been within her, buried beneath fear and pain, but never extinguished. Tucker hadn't created it. He had simply given it room to grow, tending it with the same care he showed his land, his animals, everything he valued. And in this small corner of the Wild West, with mountain views and open skies, she had found not just safety, but joy. Not just absence of fear, but presence of love. Not just survival, but life in its fullest measure.